Embrace of the Unbound. Chapter 1. Awakening Shadows. Dawn broke over Mourner's Canyon, the first light casting long shadows across the ancient stone temple. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and the bittersweet aroma of incense, swirling around the gathering mourners like a ghostly embrace. Kael Cinder stood at the edge of the assembly, feeling a weight of dread pressed heavily in his chest as he sought solace among these grieving souls. He needed this ritual, this connection, to reclaim what had been lost. But urgency clawed at him. By the end of the week he must find a way back to the maze, or risk losing a piece of himself forever. The temple's solemn atmosphere enveloped him as whispers of prayers echoed in the stillness, drawing him closer to the heart of the gathering. Kael shifted his weight, anxiety coiling in his gut as unwanted memories surged, vivid and intrusive. The faces of lost loved ones invaded his thoughts, each one a reminder of his failures, each one a whisper urging him to retreat. The mourners moved in unison, chanting prayers that reverberated against the canyon walls, yet he felt invisible in the crowd. Each beat of the distant drum resonated within him. 3 days left. If he didn't find a path to the maze, the consequences would seal him in regret, a burden he could not bear. He gripped the rough stone wall behind him, the texture grounding him, but the pressure only intensified. With a deep breath, Kael stepped forward, desperate to join the chants and feel the warmth of acceptance wash over him. But as he opened his mouth to speak the words, a figure emerged from the shadows, a familiar silhouette that froze him in place. The air thickened, and his heart thundered like a war drum. No, not now. Not here. The figure, a reminder of everything he had tried to escape, advanced toward him with predatory grace. Kael's throat tightened. He couldn't allow himself to be distracted. He had to reclaim his identity, to find a way back before the week slipped away, before he lost everything. The mourners' faces blurred as they focused on the ritual, their voices a haunting melody that filled Kael's ears. He hesitated, caught between the urge to flee and the need to confront his past. The figure smirked, eyes glinting with old memories, old pains. "You think you can find solace here? You can't escape your failures." Kael's breath caught in his throat. Time was not on his side. Each second felt like a weight crushing him, the deadline looming larger. He had to decide, face the ghost of his past, or risk losing his chance to reclaim who he was. The ritual continued around him, but the burden of his past loomed over him, ready to crush him. He could either turn his back on the mourners, on the possibility. Dusk settled over Mourner's Canyon Temple, as the sun's last embers cast long shadows across the carved stone facade. The air was thick with the scent of incense swirling around Kael, mingling with the earthy aroma of burnt offerings laid carefully in the alcoves along the winding pathway. He paused, grounding himself with the rough stone beneath his fingertips, and stared into the open-air courtyard where mourners' voices faded into hushed reverence. The soft trickle of distant water echoed through the canyon, a reminder of life persisting even as memories surged within him. He clutched his chest, struggling to breathe as images of the past flooded his mind. Am I ready to face the ghosts that linger in my thoughts? He stepped further away from the gathering as the whispers of prayers faded, mirroring the day's last light. The temple loomed above him, its grandeur both majestic and oppressive. The rough, cool stone of the temple walls pressed against his back, anchoring him in a moment that felt suspended in time. With each heartbeat, failures and regrets rose to the surface, faces he wished he could forget surfacing like specters. Leaves rustled overhead, taunting him with doubts. Yet, as the day slipped away, he straightened his shoulders, resolve filling him. The cool evening air tightened around him, hinting at the changes to come. He had come this far. It was time to face the truth, not run from it. In the hidden alcove, he pressed his palms against the weathered stone, tracing the intricate carvings that depicted the infamous jewel which stained this sacred place. Each chiseled line whispered tales of loss and betrayal, resonating with the turmoil within him. The air thickened with the scent of damp earth and fading incense, mingling with the sharp tang of regret lingering on his tongue. Would he allow these memories to define him, or would he rise to meet them, unburdened? The silent call of the canyon urged him to seek clarity instead of retreating into shadows. The sun dipped lower,
casting a soft glow through the gaps in the high cliff overhang, illuminating the path ahead. He hesitated, feeling the heaviness of his past pulling him back. But as darkness enveloped the canyon, the solemnity of the temple deepened, wrapping around him like a heavy fog. Kael stood at the threshold of confrontation. The whispers of the mourners faded, leaving only the sound of his heartbeat. Shadows danced along the stone walls, a reminder that even in darkness, beauty could be found. With a final breath, he stepped forward into the open courtyard, determined.
The courtyard of the Mourners Canyon Temple unfolded before Kael, a mosaic of stone and shadow, illuminated by the morning light filtering through the canyon's crevices. He inhaled the mingled scents of earth and incense, resonating with the prayers woven into this sacred place. Gravel skittered beneath his boots, echoing in the stillness as he approached the figure standing ahead. An unwelcome spectre from his past, their back turned and unaware of the storm brewing within him. Urgency swelled within Kael, amplified by the weight of the shadows that clung to him, suffocating and relentless. Here at the temple he sought answers, a reckoning he had long postponed. He would not be ignored this time. Kael pressed forward, the distance between them narrowing with each determined step. The figure's shoulders stiffened at his approach, a subtle shift that revealed their awareness. Kael's jaw tightened. He hated how easily he could read them, how the past lingered like a bitter taste on his tongue. "You owe me this much. Don't cloak your disdain in silence," he called out, his voice darkly poetic and urgent. Silence enveloped them, thick and suffocating, until the figure's laughter shattered it, sharp and brittle, a jagged reminder of his place in their world. "You think you deserve my time," the words wrapped around Kael, tightening like a noose. As the figure turned to him, their gaze was a cold stone wall. A sudden pause gripped Kael, the confrontation heavier than he had imagined. He had rehearsed this moment, yet now it felt like a weight too heavy to bear. Clenching his fists, he forced out, "I must unearth the truth buried within your silence." The figure cut him off, their voice a whip crack in the stillness. "This world has no place for you, Kael. You've always been beneath me, and nothing has changed." Each word landed like a blow, resonating in the hollow depths of his being. Kael's breath caught, a sound swallowed by the canyon silence. Shadows flickered around him, taunting his insecurities and laying bare every failure before this once familiar face. As the figure turned away, Kael's world tilted, the chasm of isolation widening between them. The whispers of the mourners rose, a haunting chorus that drowned out his own thoughts. "What am I now, if not a wraith adrift in the void of your neglect?" Desperation clawed at his throat as he stepped back, yet something stubborn ignited within him. He would not fade into obscurity, not without a fight. The canyon held its breath, the air thick with anticipation. A question lingered. How could he reclaim his worth in a world that had so easily discarded him? Dusk enveloped the Mourners Canyon Temple in muted purples and deep blues, shadows pooling in the crevices of its carved stone facade. The air was thick with the scent of incense, a bitter sweetness mingling with the smoke of burnt offerings that curled through the open courtyard like whispered secrets. Kael Cinder sat on the cool stone steps leading into the temple, tracing the rough surface with trembling fingers. The rustle of offerings danced in the gentle wind, accompanied by the distant trickle of water, a reminder of life amid the solemnity. In this sacred space, echoes of his past intertwined with the present, each breath a struggle against self-doubt that threatened to engulf him. He fidgeted, glancing around as uncertainty gnawed at him, yet something about this place anchored him. The weight of its history demanded honesty, urging him to confront the demons that haunted him. Kael studied the intricate carvings depicting a fierce duel, the fading sunlight casting shadows that animated the figures as if they were alive. Dismissive words from a past he wished to escape clawed at his mind. He swallowed hard, the taste of ash lingering in the air, an unwelcome reminder of failure. His heart raced, each beat echoing his unspoken fears. The wind rustled the leaves overhead, carrying faint hints of forgotten prayers. The incense-laden air felt both suffocating and familiar, enveloping him like a heavy cloak. Clenching his fists, the rough stone bit into his palms, grounding him in the moment. His gaze fell on the offerings lining the winding pathway, tokens of hope and despair from those seeking solace. A smooth stone caught his attention, its surface worn down by countless hands.
He reached for it, its coolness against his skin starkly contrasting with the warmth of his whispered prayer for clarity and acceptance. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the cliffs, darkness crept into the canyon, cooling the air around him. The weight of his past lingered, no longer suffocating him, but propelling him forward. Pressing the stone to his chest, he felt its solid presence, a reminder of his worth. The canyon held its breath, waiting for him to embrace the very mistakes that had shaped him. As dusk deepened, Kael rose from the steps, a new sense of determination igniting within him. The air buzzed with the possibility of redemption as he turned toward the canyon's entrance, the path ahead winding like a promise. With each step, the rustling leaves and whispered prayers transformed into a melody of hope, affirming that belonging meant embracing his journey, not erasing it. The temple stood in silent witness, ready to bear witness to his first step into the unknown. Kael stepped forward, the cool stone beneath his feet, a reminder of the past he was ready to honor rather than escape. Each footfall resonated with a newfound purpose, echoing in the canyon's depth.
Dusk draped the mourner's canyon temple in shadows, each flicker of fading light a signal of time's relentless march. Kael Cinder sat among the remnants of the ritual, inhaling the scent of burnt sage mingling with fresh earth beneath him. Memories of a dark figure lingered like a haunting melody, stirring echoes of his past. He had until the week's end to reclaim his identity and find a way back to the maze promising freedom from regret. Every heartbeat felt like a ticking clock, urging him to decide, would he seek the acceptance he yearned for or hide from the very community that could offer him redemption? Thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance, mirroring the shadows around him. He could still hear the laughter of the mourners, their faces bright with compassion, yet dread settled in his stomach. Stepping into their light meant confronting the weight of his failures, mistakes etched into his being like scars. Would they cast him aside, seeing the monster he feared lurked inside? The thought clenched around him, tightening with every passing moment, a stark reminder that failing to act could mean losing everything he had fought for. The temple's stone walls loomed, whispering doubts that echoed in his mind. Kael clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms as he battled the urge to flee. He could almost hear their prayers blending with the rustling leaves, a symphony of hope clashing with his inner discord. Rejection was a constant specter, yet the question remained, could he bear the burden of his silence any longer? As the sun slipped below the horizon, his palms grew clammy, and he shifted his weight from foot to foot, anxiety coiling within him. Just as he began to rise, a flicker of light caught his eye, a glimmer from the temple's altar where offerings lay forgotten. It beckoned him, a promise of connection and acceptance. But what of the scars still marring his soul? He shifted uneasily, his gaze darting away as uncertainty crept in. Time slipped through his fingers like sand in an hourglass. Mere days remained to confront the shadows of his past or forfeit his chance at redemption. With a deep breath, Kael stood, the decision crystallizing in his mind like ice. He would face the mourners, embrace the vulnerability that scared him most. As he stepped toward the flickering light, his heart raced, a storm of determination and dread churning within. But just as he reached the altar, a shadow moved in the corner of his eye, a figure lurking in the darkness. It wasn't over yet. Something in the shadows could change everything. He swallowed hard, uncertainty gnawing at him. Was this figure friend or foe? Chapter 2: Whispers of Release. Kael Cinder stood at the Mourner's Canyon Temple, the air thick with the scent of incense and the echo of whispered prayers. Morning light filtered through cracks in the stone, illuminating the altar where the prophet awaited. He grappled with the demands of the new god, how they intertwined with his identity as a demon. Time slipped away from him, and by week's end, if he failed to navigate the maze within himself, he would lose a part of himself forever, something he clutched tightly, fearing the emptiness it might leave behind. The community's expectations wrapped around him like a heavy cloak, suffocating him as he faced his fears. Stepping closer, every heartbeat resonated with urgency, a reminder of the stakes at hand. The prophet's eyes glowed with a fierce intensity as he spoke, his voice sharp and unyielding. Kael, your past failures shaped the new god's demands. You must confront what you once were to embrace what you will become. You cannot hide from the truth. Kael's breath hitched. The words struck him like a dagger. Memories surged, moments of weakness, of regret. The fear of losing everything slammed against his chest. 3 days, he reminded himself. 3 days until he would be forced to make a choice that felt more like a curse. But here in this temple, the stakes felt higher.
The community's eyes were on him, judging, waiting for him to falter. As the ritual continued, whispers slithered through the crowd, each one a reminder of his past failures. Will he rise, or will he fall? The words wrapped around him like chains. Kael's heart raced, drowning out the prophet's voice as he struggled to focus. He needed to break free, to reclaim his identity before the new god's demands stripped him of everything he had left. The pressure mounted, sweat beading on his brow. What if he couldn't rise to the occasion? What if the truth was too much to bear? An unsettling movement pulled Kael's gaze toward the darkness at the edge of the temple. Anxiety clawed at him as a figure stepped forward. Another demon, eyes glimmering with an unsettling mix of sympathy and challenge. "You think you can hide from the god's will?" they taunted, their voice a whisper that echoed like a threat. Kael's pulse quickened. Kael's gaze darted between the looming shadows, uncertainty tightening in his chest. The weight of the decision pressed on him. His fists clenched tightly against the altar as he fought for breath. The prophet's voice reverberated in his skull. "Embrace the haunting echoes of your past, or surrender to the void that beckons." Each tick of the clock echoed in his mind, a countdown to the end of the week and the impending loss of his identity. Kael's breath came in short bursts. The darkness whispered temptingly, offering refuge from the harsh truths he feared to confront.
The air in Mourner's Canyon Temple was thick with incense, swirling like the doubts in Kael's mind. Sunlight streamed through the cracked stone ceiling, illuminating the shadows that danced across the altar. There the prophet stood with arms raised, his voice echoing ominously. "Your freedom is intertwined with the new god's demands." Kael's pulse quickened. He needed to understand the implications of this revelation before the week slipped away. If he failed to navigate back to the maze, everything he held dear would be lost. The oppressive truth weighed on him, as relentless as the heat radiating from the stone walls. The weight of time pressed down on him, filling him with urgency. The prophet's voice sliced through Kael's rising panic. "The demon's past failures bind you, and the new god has a price. You must choose, your freedom for your loved ones, or the chains of your identity." Each word struck Kael like a dagger, twisting in his gut. Shadows whispered his fears, amplifying the turmoil within. How could he abandon those he cherished? 3 hours until sunset, the deadline for his decision loomed like an executioner's axe ready to fall. Clenching his fists, he dug his nails into his palms, grounding himself against the storm brewing within. Kael grappled with the ultimatum. What did it mean to be free if it cost him everything? He swallowed hard, his heart racing as he glanced at the altar. The flickering flames seemed to mock his indecision. "To lose them would be to lose my very essence," he whispered, desperation rising as he gripped the altar tightly. The shadows shifted again, and he spotted a figure lurking behind the altar, eyes gleaming with dark amusement. Did they want him to fail? "You must decide, Kael," the prophet urged, urgency lacing his voice. "The longer you wait, the heavier the burden of your choice." Kael's hands trembled, breath quickening as panic gripped him. The heat of the flames danced on his skin, a stark reminder of the need to act, yet faces of his loved ones flooded his mind, each memory a chain that held him back. Could he sacrifice their happiness for his own freedom? The shadows whispered their taunts, amplifying his paralysis. He fought to find clarity amid the chaos. As the final words hung in the air, Kael stood frozen, caught between the prophet's revelation and the haunting vision of his loved ones slipping away. The relentless drumbeat of impending loss echoed in his mind, each second a reminder of his dilemma. Time was slipping away, and the choice loomed before him, monstrous and unavoidable. Is it fate's cruel hand that would rob me of their light? Dread pooled in his stomach. The figure in the shadow. The Mourner's Canyon Temple towered before Kael, its rugged stone walls absorbing the dawn's light like the shadows of his past. The air was thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings, wrapping around him like a familiar cloak of despair and hope. He paused, his pulse quickening as he fidgeted with the heart-shaped stone in his pocket, its smooth surface grounding him as he stepped further into the sacred space. Whispers of prayers floated on the wind, echoing his own longings. Kael drew a shaky breath, unseen eyes seeming to bore into him. Here at this crossroads he stood ready to confront the truth that had haunted him since his fall from grace. Kael scanned the temple, searching for a flicker of understanding among the mourners gathered at the altar.
They were like shadows, their faces obscured by grief, yet he sensed their hopes tethered to his shoulders, heavy as stone. What if I falter? His stomach twisted in knots. The echoes of his past whispered in his ear, memories of the infernal Lord's laughter mingling with cries of the damned. He clenched the heart-shaped stone tighter, a talisman against the tide of despair threatening to pull him under. "Come on, Kael, face the truth. It cuts both ways," he murmured to himself, his voice a low rumble in the stillness. As he stepped forward, sunlight streamed through cracks in the stone, illuminating dust motes that danced like the souls he had once condemned. The warmth reminded him of the child he had spared, igniting compassion amidst the ashes of his former self. A grave mistake indeed, but maybe in chasing redemption I can be more than just a ghost of my past. He straightened every fiber, urging him to speak, to reveal his fears to the community that had once banished him. "I stand here, a spectre of my past, weighed down by," Kael began, his voice barely breaking the stillness, but before he could gather the strength to continue, a voice boomed from the rear of the gathering. "You think you can lead us, demon? You who turned your back on your own kind?" The elder's words sliced through the air, sharp and unforgiving, like the crack of a whip. Kael's heart sank, his moment of clarity shrouded in doubt. The community's scorn hung heavily around him, a tangible thing that made it hard to breathe. "I am not what I was," Kael retorted, his voice rising, a mix of defiance and vulnerability, "but I fear I shall lose everything." He faltered, the weight of his past crashing down. The heart-shaped stone slipped from his fingers, rolling away, a symbol of his crumbling resolve. He watched it tumble, a final reminder of what he stood to lose. "What worth is a demon's word?" the elder pressed, eyes glinting with skepticism. Heat of shame crept up.
Dusk settled over Mourner's Canyon Temple, painting the ancient stones in hues of crimson and gold. The air was thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings, swirling around Kael Cinder as he stood at the altar. The weight of the prophet's revelation pressed down on him like the heavy air before a storm, demanding his understanding of the new God's demands. Time was a relentless predator, closing in. If he didn't find a way back to the maze before the week ended, he would have to relinquish something sacred, his connection to the very people he fought to protect. Each heartbeat echoed in his ears, a reminder that his freedom was slipping away, entangled in the shadows of his past. The prophet's voice rang out, a chilling reminder of past failures. The demon sought power, yet it was the bonds of love that tethered it to the abyss. "Look upon your loved ones, Kael. What will you sacrifice for freedom?" The words sliced through his resolve like ice. Kael's pulse quickened, matching the weight of his decision as visions of his family flickered in his mind, fragile like candle flames in the wind. The choice loomed over him. Freedom came at a cost, and the price might be his very soul. He swallowed hard, dread coating his tongue. The relentless ticking of the clock marked the urgency of his choice. 3 days left. 3 days until the chains would be forged anew. Kael's fingers trembled as he clenched the amulet around his neck, a remnant of his past life. Its warmth was a cruel comfort, a reminder of what could be lost. "You must choose, Kael." The prophet's voice rose, cutting through the haze. Shadows danced around him, whispering of freedom but tainted with the scent of betrayal. Could he truly abandon those who loved him? Panic surged within him, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps as he fought against the emotions that held him captive. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. 2 days left. The weight of loss encroached on his heart, squeezing tighter until he could scarcely breathe. The ritual crescendoed, energy crackling in the air. "Embrace your fear, Kael," the prophet urged, eyes burning with fervor. But how could he? Fear for his loved ones clawed at his insides, a beast determined to keep him in chains. The ticking grew louder, a mantra of despair. He could see their faces, hear their voices pleading for him to stay, to be the protector he had always promised to be. But freedom beckoned, a siren's call echoing in his mind. The choice narrowed to a razor's edge, hold on or let go. With every second that passed, the line blurred, leaving only the bitter taste. The Mourner's Canyon Temple loomed before Kael as dusk draped its shadowy veil over the rugged stone. The final light of day dipped below the high cliffs, casting elongated shadows that danced across the intricate carvings depicting the fabled duel that stained these stones with history. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mingling with the charred remains of offerings, sweet yet acrid, while the faint rustle of leaves carried secrets from those who had come before him. A cool breeze snaked along the winding pathway, beckoning him closer, yet it carried with it an undercurrent of unease, as if the spirit of the canyon sensed his turmoil. He hesitated, community expectations looming over him, heavy and inescapable. Kael stepped onto the worn stones, their rough texture grounding him. Each footfall echoed softly, swallowed by the solemn atmosphere. The distant trickle of water from a hidden stream reminded him of life beyond the temple's solemnity, and he paused, allowing the sound to settle in his mind, a temporary balm against his gnawing fears. He clenched his fists, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingertips. Memories of whispered prayers and shared burdens flooded his thoughts, leaving a bitter taste of regret. Would they ever forgive him for wanting to break free? The temple's open-air central courtyard beckoned, the air thick with the scent of burnt offerings, a mixture of herbs and smoke that clung to his skin. Shadows stretched and shifted as the light faded, creating a chiaroscuro of uncertainty and hope. As he reached the courtyard, the rustle of offerings left by others caught his attention, each token a silent plea, a reminder of the lives intertwined with his own. The rustling leaves swelled into a cacophony of voices, each urging him to choose between shattering his world or redeeming it. The stones beneath him felt both inviting and oppressive, each carved scene a history he could not escape. Trapped in their stories, he yearned to write his own. Kael inhaled deeply, tasting the cool night air laced with remnants of incense, a bittersweet reminder of the expectations that loomed like a storm cloud. The canyon walls stood steep and unforgiving, waiting for him to choose between the freedom that whispered to him like a distant star and the love that anchored him to this place. He closed his eyes, the sound of rustling leaves transforming into a symphony of voices, urging him forward. Would he confront the failures of his past or flee into the night, abandoning those he held dear? As he stood at the edge of the courtyard, the temperature dropped, chilling him to the bone. Shadows pooled around him like ink, yet within that darkness he glimpsed a flicker of resolve. Perhaps embracing the weight of his fears was the only way to truly liberate himself. With a final shuddering breath, Kael opened his eyes, steadying himself. Chapter 3 Veil of Shadows. The air thickened as Kael stepped into Mourner's Canyon Temple, a sanctum of shadows and whispered prayers. Each footfall echoed against the stone, a reminder of the weight he carried, the weight of a community's hope. Lingering on the edges of doubt was no longer an option. The time for questions had come. A flicker of light caught his eye, dancing like a flame above the prophet's head. The scent of burnt offerings mingled with the fresh morning air, sharpening his senses. The temple, once a refuge, now felt alive, as if the very stones held their breath, awaiting the clash between faith and fear. Kael approached the altar with each heartbeat echoing in his ears. The prophet loomed before him, a figure shrouded in robes that absorbed the light around him. The crowd of mourners shifted uneasily, their breaths caught in their throats as tension mounted. Kael squared his shoulders, forcing himself to meet the prophet's gaze. The man's lips curved into a smirk, an unsettling mix of amusement and menace. He swallowed, his throat dry and constricted. The prophet raised a hand, fingers splayed and energy crackled through the air, reverberating through Kael. Doubt gnawed at his resolve, making him wonder if this was the moment he would unravel. A low hum filled the temple, resonating within Kael's chest. He glanced at the mourners, their faces pale and eyes wide with apprehension. This was no ordinary gathering. The prophet's voice rang out, smooth as silk, yet laced with iron. Question, not the will of the new god, he intoned, each word a dagger aimed at Kael's heart. The mourners flinched as if struck by the weight of his command. Kael's breath quickened, a wild rhythm clashing with the stillness of the moment. He was desperate to speak, to demand answers, but the words faltered on his tongue, ensnared in a web of fear and uncertainty. With a flick of his wrist, the prophet summoned a wave of energy that snapped through the air. A bold mourner, daring enough to raise a voice against him, crumpled to the ground, limbs convulsing. Gasps erupted, a chorus of horror rippling through the crowd. Kael's pulse thundered in his ears. This was power, raw and unyielding. He staggered back, paralyzed by the sight, the reality of danger wrapping around him like a shroud. The prophet's eyes gleamed, a predator savoring the fear he instilled. Kael's resolve wavered, the truth of his mission crumbling like ash in the wind. Kael stood at the precipice of despair, haunted by the sight of the fallen mourner.
The prophet's smirk deepened, a grotesque mask of authority. "Defy me again, and you will join them," he warned. The threat, a heavy cloak enveloping Kael's shoulders, the words sunk deep, a chilling reminder of the stakes. The temple felt smaller, the collective fear of the crowd coiling around.
The air thickened with incense, curling tendrils enveloping Kael, encasing him in their embrace. Mourner's Canyon Temple loomed before him, its stones etched with the memories of those who had once prayed for mercy. Shadows clung to him, the prophet's words echoing in his mind, a relentless drumbeat of coercion. "Defy me again, and you will join them." The threat clung to him like a dense fog, wrapping around him with oppressive weight. Worshippers whispered prayers, their fervor rising in wispy tendrils, fueled by the fervor of prayers, each murmur a dagger twisting deeper into his resolve. What had he become in this cacophony of devotion? Kael clenched his fists, the rough stone of the temple pressing into his palms like a physical reminder of his constraints. Around him the faithful knelt, faces upturned, eyes gleaming with the light of a new god, a god who demanded sacrifice and sought to mold them into something unrecognizable. The scent of burning herbs choked him, memories of laughter and freedom slipping through his fingers like sand. Once he had reveled in the thrill of autonomy, but now each heartbeat reverberated with suffocating expectation. Would he barter his essence for acceptance? The congregation's whispers surrounded him, a chaotic surge of devotion that scraped against his skin. They believed in the new order, in the prophet's promises. Each fervent declaration felt like an accusation, a reminder that he stood apart, drifting among the living, an unseen shadow amid their fervent devotion. Kael's throat tightened. These were his people. Yet he was a ghost among the living, a misfit in a tapestry woven with fervor. The prophet's smirk replayed in his mind, a grotesque reminder of the authority he wielded. How could he carve out a path for himself amid such overwhelming pressure? He took a step back, shadows swallowing him whole, but the temple held him captive. A distant drumbeat pulsed through the ground, a metronome for his spiraling thoughts. Could he trust himself to navigate this new reality, or would he be crushed under the weight of the god's expectations? The incense clung to his skin, a reminder of the sacrifices demanded. Each breath filled him with a desperation that clawed at his chest. This was not just about survival, it was about identity. The price of conformity was too steep. Would he sacrifice who he was for the new order? Kael's gaze fell to the ground, where offerings lay scattered, tokens of faith left to rot in the shadow of the temple. With a final glance at the thrumming crowd, a question nagged at him, demanding an answer. What remained of Kael's Cinder in the face of such power? As the final light of day faded from the last rays of sunlight vanished beyond the canyon's jagged edges, plunging Mourner's Canyon Temple into a cool shadow. Kael stood at the temple's threshold. His heart raced in his chest as he breathed in the scent of damp earth and wilted offerings. The air crackled with fervent prayers spiraling toward the heavens, all directed at the prophet, who stood atop the dais like a rock amidst a turbulent sea. How many had succumbed to his lure? How many had traded their will for the comfort of blind faith? Kael's resolve sharpened. He would confront the man who commanded their devotion, demanding answers that cut deeper than soothing words. No longer would he be a pawn in this game of shadows and faith. Kael stepped forward, each footfall a struggle against the tide of worshippers pressing in, their bodies a living wall of fervor. Their eyes pierced him, sharp and judgmental. The prophet's gaze, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, beckoned Kael closer, yet the air thickened, stifling. "What is it you seek, Kael Cinder?" The words dripped with condescension, a mere ripple in the sea of chants echoing behind him. "The new god demands sacrifice." Kael's voice quivered, barely breaking through the growing chorus. "What does that mean for the mourners? What will become of us?" He clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. A murmur rippled through the crowd, anger flickering in the eyes surrounding him. They were ready to turn, to brand him a heretic. The prophet raised a hand, silencing the crowd as though he wielded a weapon. "Obedience is the path to salvation." His voice resonated, rich and intoxicating, drawing the mourners deeper into his fold. Kael staggered back, the fervor of their faith pressing down on him like a heavy burden. He searched their faces, once familiar but now foreign, as doubt began to gnaw at him. What if he was wrong? What if this was the only way to find peace in the chaos? Yet that spark ignited a fire within him. He couldn't accept this fate. Desperation clawed at his throat, and he forced the words out.
But at what cost? What of our souls? The crowd shifted, uncertainty rippling through them, but the prophet's laugh cut through, sharp and dismissive. Souls? The prophet leaned forward, eyes gleaming. You speak of souls as if they matter. The new God requires loyalty, Kael. Loyalty or nothing. The words dripped like poison, and Kael swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the prophet's authority bearing down on him. The chant swelled again, a tide of voices rising, drowning out his defiance. Obey, obey, obey! Panic surged within him as he stood alone. The ground beneath him felt unsteady. The chant echoed in his ears, a relentless tide washing away the remnants of his conviction.
The echoing grove swallowed the last light of day, shadows creeping along the gnarled roots and moss-laden stones. Kael stood among the twisted branches, the scent of burning incense thick in the air, mingling with damp soil and something acrid. The mourners' hushed whispers drifted through the grove, a haunting symphony of devotion, their eyes flaring with fervor. Each flicker of the torches cast dancing shapes on the ground, mirroring his inner turmoil. A question clawed at his insides while he inhaled the oppressive atmosphere, weighed down by expectation. The crowd's fervor morphed into a living entity consuming him, and he longed to break free from its grasp. Kael stepped deeper into the grove, branches snagging at his clothes like accusing fingers. The mourners stood in a semicircle, faces etched with sorrow, bodies rigid with loyalty. He clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. A part of him hungered for that certainty, the ease of submission. But another part, a flicker of defiance, simmered just beneath the surface. Each whisper seemed to question him, to challenge his very essence. What if they were right? What if he was nothing without their belief? Turning away, he swallowed hard against the lump in his throat, doubt bitter on his tongue. No, he wouldn't be a ghost in this grove, a shadow of what was expected. Hesitating, he glanced back at the mourners, their faces blurred, and he squeezed his eyes shut. The prophet's words drummed in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. You are chosen, you are a vessel of truth. But what truth lay buried beneath that burden? His breath quickened, each inhale a battle against the suffocating pressure. The torches flickered, shadows longing to escape the confines of the grove. Kael's pulse thundered in his ears, echoing the chaos in his mind. He could no longer tolerate being part of this blind devotion. He needed to confront the source of his torment, the prophet himself. With sudden resolve, Kael stepped forward, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. Each step felt monumental, a defiance against the tide of the crowd. Could he truly stand against the very beliefs that shaped their lives? His pulse raced as he approached the altar, the scent of incense clinging to him, nearly overwhelming. But beneath it all lay the earthy aroma of the grove, grounding him. This was his identity, his choice. He would reclaim his voice, whatever the cost. Kael stood before the altar, hands trembling, reflecting the tempest within. The prophet's silhouette loomed ahead, a figure of authority and fear. Kael's resolve quaked, dread creeping in like ice. What would happen when he spoke? Kael stepped into Mourner's Canyon Temple as dusk settled, the last remnants of sunlight fading against the stone walls carved with intricate depictions of past duels. The air thickened with the scent of incense and burnt offerings, carrying whispers of ancient prayers that echoed in the solemn atmosphere. Shadows danced in the flickering torchlight, creating a haunting tableau that quickened his pulse. Clenching his fists against the cool stone of the altar, the moment pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. The prophet's words echoed in his mind. Identity was forged, not given. He inhaled sharply, a mixture of excitement and fear tightening his chest. Every heartbeat drummed a relentless rhythm, urging him forward into the gathering darkness, where the essence of his fate awaited him at the altar. As Kael approached the altar, the air crackled with tension, a palpable force that sent tremors through him. Shadows twisted and writhed, forming a grotesque silhouette just beyond the flickering torchlight. The demon emerged, its laughter a mocking rumble that resonated through the temple's stone walls. Brave little Kael, it taunted, each syllable dripping with contempt. What dark designs does this new god weave for us? What horrors await in this tempest? Kael squared his shoulders, his jaw set firmly, defiance igniting a spark within him. The demon's form flickered, revealing glimpses of despair, twisted landscapes, charred remains, and the faces of those he loved, lost in sorrow. Fear threatened to overwhelm him,
but he shook it off, focusing on the here and now. "I must unearth the truth, no matter how deep the shadows may run," he shouted, his voice trembling, but resolute, a challenge thrown into the void. The ground trembled beneath him, a low rumble that sent vibrations through his very core. The demon's laughter crescendoed, reverberating like thunder. "The truth, you cannot bear it, Kael. The prophecy speaks of a choice that will seal your fate and the fate of all you hold dear." Shadows coalesced into a swirling vortex, revealing cryptic images that danced before his eyes, each more terrifying than the last. Kael's breath caught in his throat, a flicker of doubt igniting within him, yet he could not let it show. "What treacherous path must I tread? What sacrifice is demanded of me?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, teetering on the edge of uncertainty. The demon's grin widened, a grotesque mask of malice. "You will learn, Kael. In the depths of your choices lies the truth, a truth that will bind you to the shadows or set you free." With each word, the ground shook violently, a jolt of terror coursing through him. Kael staggered, gripping the altar for stability, the demon's words pressing in from all sides.
Chapter 4 Threshold of Shadows. Kael staggered as he crossed the threshold of Mourner's Canyon Temple. The air was thick with solemn reverence, clinging to his skin like a shroud. Dawn's light filtered through the cracks in the temple's stone walls, illuminating dust motes that danced in the stillness, each whispering of countless prayers. The shadows stretched around him, thickening the uncertainty. Would he confront the prophet, or would the truth consume him before he had a chance to wield it? The prophet stood at the altar, a figure seamlessly woven into the temple's fabric. "You seek clarity, Kael Cinder," he intoned, voice resonating within the stone walls. "But clarity is a mirror reflecting your soul. What sacrifice are you willing to make?" Kael's breath hitched. Sacrifice? He had come seeking answers, not riddles. The prophet's gaze cut through him, unsettling, yet unwavering, forcing Kael to confront the doubts gnawing at his resolve. Would he lay bare his fears or retreat, a coward bound by his insecurities? Kael stepped closer, fists trembling at his sides. "What does this God expect of me?" The words burst forth, raw and desperate. The prophet's lips curled slightly, amusement flickering in his eyes. "To know is to sacrifice understanding for insight. First you must face the shadows lurking within. Only then can you grasp the threads of your destiny." Shadows, he felt them creeping, whispering of failures and regrets. Each word from the prophet unfurled layers of his past, lost friendships, missed opportunities, moments he wished to forget. A knot tightened in his chest, a mixture of fear and anger rising. "What do you know of sacrifice?" he spat, voice low and threatening. The prophet remained unfazed, merely observing, as if assessing a block of marble. "Sacrifice isn't just losing something, it's about what comes next. You cling to your fears, yet they are the very chains binding you to the past. Break them, and you shall see the truth laid bare." Kael's skin prickled as the prophet's words wrapped around him, heavy and inescapable. What truth lay beneath the surface? Is the truth worth all this pain? Can he even handle what's underneath? "Cut the games, old man. Just give it to me straight," Kael shouted, voice echoing against the stone. Anger surged through him, an overwhelming wave of confusion. The prophet's smile faded, replaced by a solemnity that wrapped around Kael like a cold embrace. "You must confront your past, Kael. Through this trial, you will find the path to your truth. Do not fear the darkness, it is merely a reflection of what you refuse to acknowledge." Kael's heartbeat quickened, each pulse a reminder of the choices that led him here. Could he face the darkness within? Kael stood at the threshold of the Mourner's Canyon Temple, shadows swirling around him like restless spirits. The prophet, draped in tattered robes, loomed before him, eyes glinting with ancient wisdom. The air buzzed with whispered prayers, each echo a reminder of sacrifices made in the name of the new God. Dusk settled like a shroud, blurring the lines between fear and resolve. What were the demands of this God? Jagged shadows danced in the flickering candlelight, illuminating the prophet's face, revealing a subtle smile that felt both comforting and foreboding. Anticipation mingled with dread, quickening Kael's pulse. The time had come to confront what lay within him, to unearth the truths buried deep beneath layers of silence. The prophet's words flowed like a river, each syllable a stone dropped into Kael's consciousness. To enter the maze, you must confront your fears,
Face the darkness that gnaws at your soul. Only then can you transcend the chains of your past. Kael's breath caught, the revelation gripped him tightly. Memories surged, his mother's tear-streaked face, the moment he chose to flee rather than fight. Would he relive that pain? Jagged shadows danced in the flickering candlelight, each figure a reminder of what he had lost and what he must be willing to relinquish. The temple walls closed in, the air thick with incense and damp stone. Kael grasped the edge of the altar, knuckles whitening. "What must I relinquish to break these chains?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. The prophet leaned closer, eyes locked onto his, as if searching for the truth buried within. "Only what you cling to most tightly. Freedom demands a price. Are you prepared to pay it?" The words echoed in Kael's mind, intertwining with the pulse of his heart. Stepping into the maze, he envisioned its labyrinthine paths, whispering secrets, each step heavy with the weight of his choices. Would he be brave enough to face his own reflection? A flicker of doubt crossed Kael's mind, but determination surged like fire. He took a step forward, the resolve in his chest igniting. The memories clamored for attention, each a chain he had forged, each a scar that shaped him. They coiled around his throat, tightening with every passing second. I can linger in the shadows of my past, chained to its weight, or I can step into the abyss of the unknown. The prophet's expression shifted, a glimmer of approval or perhaps challenge. Kael straightened, breathing through the tension. He would confront the fears, but the thought of what he might lose gnawed at him. What if the price was more than he could bear? The candles flickered, casting a
Dawn crept into Mourner's Canyon Temple, illuminating the ancient stone walls that whispered secrets of regret. Kael Cinder stood at the threshold, his heart beat a steady rhythm, echoing the tension in the air. The time had come to confront the remnants of his shattered past and seek guidance from the new god. 3 days remained until the maze would seal his fate, and the weight of that urgency pressed heavily on him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself against the suffocating aura that hung in the air, thick with echoes of his mistakes. There was no turning back now if he wanted to reclaim his lost identity and freedom. As Kael stepped inside, the shadows coiled around him, and the air chilled. Visions exploded before his eyes. The faces of those he had betrayed flickered like dying embers, their whispers clawing at his resolve. "You will never escape your past," they taunted, their voices sharp and unforgiving. He pushed himself to move forward, knowing he could not let them win. The temple pulsed ominously with an unsettling energy, a reminder that dawn was merely a veil over the darkness within. He inhaled sharply, his breath coming in shallow gasps. If he lingered too long, the haunting voices would drown him. Kael pressed his palms against the cool stones, searching for strength. His hands trembled slightly as he steadied his breath. The god's presence loomed on the other side of his fears, waiting. Just as he gathered his courage, a deep voice echoed through the hall, sending ripples of dread through him. "To embrace the new, you must sacrifice the old. What will you be willing to lose?" The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. His heart raced. What did it mean? He couldn't fathom losing anything more, yet the clock ticked, reminding him time was slipping away. If he hesitated, he might lose everything. Kael swallowed, a bitter taste of panic lingering in his mouth. The choice hung heavy in the air, shrouded in uncertainty. Could he let go of the last remnant of his former self? The grip of the past tightened around him like a noose. Images flashed in his mind, the maze, the power, the freedom he had once wielded. But that freedom came with chains forged from regret. 3 days until permanence. He clenched his jaw, wrestling with the urge to flee and the desperate need to confront his demons. The new god awaited, but at what cost? With a final shuddering breath, Kael stepped deeper into the temple, the echoes of his past shrieking in protest. He could feel the threshold between what was and what could be, a fragile line he had to cross. The Mourner's Canyon Temple loomed in the twilight, its stone walls absorbing the last rays of dusk. Kael Cinder inhaled the scent of roasted lizard, mingling with honeycomb from nearby vendors. The chill of the temple's stones pressed against his back, anchoring him as shadows of his past swirled in the dim light. Flickering candles cast elongated shadows over the altar, bringing to life the offerings of dried beans and canyon pears laid by devoted followers, seeking Eltharion the Forgotten's favor. Each breath felt heavy with unyielding memories as he prepared to confront the echoes of his choices, a quiet storm brewing within him. Kael stepped toward the altar, the candlelight flickering against the stone, each step pulling him closer to the phantoms of his past. He reached for a canyon pear, its cool skin a jarring contrast to the heat of his thoughts. Voices surged in his mind, urgent and insistent. "You can't let go, Kael, not of this." His grip tightened around the fruit, the memory of the festival flooding back, laughter mingling with the aroma of roasted lizard skewers. Would he trade that warmth for the dark path that lay ahead? The communal meals haunted him, the shared mushroom stew, the laughter echoing against the canyon walls. A fleeting smile tugged at his lips, only to be replaced by the faces of those he had wronged, the cost of joy etched in his memory. A temple attendant cleaned the altar, glancing up with a slight bow, hand over heart. "In your honor," she murmured, a reminder of the respect owed to this sacred space, even as his internal chaos threatened to overwhelm him. Kael's pulse raced as he glanced back at the entrance, where two canyon guides exchanged quiet words, their laughter a stark contrast to his turmoil. One gestured toward him, and the other flinched, a silent reminder of the community's sharp edge. The bitterness of fear mingled with the sweetness of the pear in his mouth. The choice loomed before him, a shadow darker than the encroaching night. His gaze returned to the altar, the relic glimmering faintly under the candlelight, a token of his past, both a burden and a beacon. Whispers filled the air, urging him to act, before the moment slipped away. Dusk deepened around him, the spirits of the vanished pressing in, urging him to act. Kael stood at the precipice of his decision, torn between the comfort of his past and the uncertainty of the future. The weight of his choices bore down like the canyon walls, yet a flicker of resolve ignited within him. Would he relinquish the last thread connecting him to that world? The altar awaited his answer, and as he took a steadying breath, he felt the weight of freedom just within reach.
Chapter 5 Shadows of Choice. The Mourner's Canyon Temple loomed before Kael, a stone sentinel carved from the canyon's very heart, catching the fading light of day as dusk wrapped around the world. Shadows pooled at his feet like dark water, creeping up the worn pathway lined with offerings, wilted flowers and charred remnants of incense that clung to the air with a heavy, sweet musk. The high cliffs, draped in twilight's embrace, echoed a distant trickle of water, a soothing yet haunting melody intertwining with the rustle of leaves, whispering secrets of the mourners who had come before him. Each breath thickened with grief as he approached the temple, the stone facade, a tapestry of battles fought and lost, imposing a somber reverence that sent a chill through him. Kael stumbled forward, urgency clawing at his throat. The scent of burnt offerings clung to his clothes, a harsh reminder of past sacrifices, and the cold stone beneath his fingertips felt alive with the memories of countless souls. From the shadows, mourners emerged, faces twisted in agony, their cries echoing against the canyon walls, blending into a cacophony that pierced through his resolve. A figure cloaked in darkness appeared at the temple's entrance, eyes glimmering with an otherworldly light, beckoning him closer. "You seek to save them, don't you?" The figure's voice was a low murmur, reverberating like the distant water, pulling him into its depths. Desperation tightened around him like a noose, urging him to act even as fear gnawed at his resolve. A surge of anger rose within him, mingling with the grief that saturated the air. "No, I can't lose who I am." His voice rose, a defiant echo against the canyon, yet uncertainty twisted in his gut, knotting tighter with every heartbeat. The figure's gaze was unwavering, filled with an ancient understanding, as if seeing into the very depths of his soul. "What is a memory worth," it mused, "when lives hang in the balance?" Kael hesitated, the question reverberating through him like the steady trickle of water, a reminder that time was slipping away. The shadows of the canyon deepened, and the chill of night seeped into his bones as darkness enveloped the canyon. The stone carvings of the temple glinted in the waning light, their stories a cruel reminder of what was at stake. He closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, the heavy scent of incense filling his lungs, mingling with the sweet decay of offerings left behind. Memories flashed before him, laughter, love, moments that shaped him. Could he truly forsake them? The choice weighed heavily on him, as if standing at the edge of a steep cliff. As the last light of day slipped behind the canyon walls, Kael faced the crossroads of sacrifice and self. The mourners' cries grew fainter, joining the...
Kael lingered at the edge of Mourner's Canyon Temple. The world felt heavy, each breath a reminder of his burdens.
The air crackled with tension, a mix of dread and reverence. The mourner's anguished cries ebbed and flowed like the tide weaving through the shadows that twisted around him. Each sound tugged at his very essence, a reminder of the sacrifices demanded by the canyon. The figure in the doorway remained, a spectre waiting for him to step into the unknown. In this dimming light, Kael wrestled with the urge to retreat, clutching his memories that glimmered like fragile glass, echoing the life he once cherished. But the canyon whispered of choices ahead, pulling him toward a decision fraught with risk. The wind whipped around him, tugging at the edges of his cloak. Kael's fingers brushed the worn leather of his satchel, a small comfort in this storm of despair. Memories flooded him, his sister's laughter, a melody that danced in the corners of his mind, brightening the shadows. A part of him longed to chase that memory, to hold it close. But the mourner's cries pierced the air again, sharp and desperate, dragging him back to the present. Each wail echoed with a demand. Sacrifice. The canyon widened, a dark void threatening to consume him if he lingered too long in indecision. Kael inhaled deeply, the scent of damp earth, mingling with the sweet aroma of wildflowers his mother used to gather. Her laughter, the warmth of her embrace, the way she had always known when he was lost. Each recollection felt like a weight pressing against his heart. What would it mean to let go of those moments? To erase the laughter and love that made him who he is? The shadows pulsed, whispering promises of salvation for the mourners, yet it felt like a theft of himself. He swayed on the edge, the ground beneath him shifting like sand. In that moment of turmoil, Kael's resolve hardened. He straightened, fists clenched at his sides. The mourners needed him, needed his strength, his sacrifice. But at what cost? Tear-streaked faces loomed in his mind, igniting a spark of resolve within him. He could be their savior, yet the price felt like a chasm too deep to cross. He needed to find a way, a path that wouldn't sever the ties to his past, but could still carry him forward. As dusk deepened, shadows thickened, clinging to him. Kael took a step back, each breath a battle, the air thick with the weight of his memories. The canyon's pull tugged at him, demanding he choose. What if those memories he clung to weren't chains but wings? He glanced back at the figure in the doorway, a silent witness to it.
The shadows crept closer, darkening the altar at Mourner's Canyon Temple. The weight of his doubts pressed down on Kael, pulling him into a deeper contemplation. The echoes of mourners' prayers blended with the rustling of offerings, creating a solemn backdrop as twilight enveloped the canyon. Jagged cliffs loomed overhead, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light, while the scent of incense hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of burnt offerings. Kael's pulse raced, each heartbeat echoing the silent path he had carved. Memories surged within him, each one a thread of his identity, whispering promises of who he had been and the cost of what he might become. It was a moment suspended in time, charged with the gravity of life and loss, as the shadows beckoned, their whispers curling into his mind. Kael stepped closer to the altar, the finality of each footfall sending a chill through his body. The shadows seemed to beckon, whispering promises that tugged at his mind, urging him to linger in the darkness. You'll forget them all, the laughter, the warmth, the love, all gone, his fists clenched, nails digging into his palms as he fought against the rising tide of fear. One step back would chain him to his memories, to the pain they carried. Yet the thought of becoming a hollow shell was unbearable. Drawing a shaky breath, he stepped forward again, the dark voices hissing, "You will be nothing." With each moment the shadows swelled, eager for his hesitation. Kael's breath quickened as a vision surged from the depths of his mind, clawing its way into focus, himself a grotesque silhouette lurking just beyond the altar. He recoiled, gripped by icy fingers. Is this the monster I've fashioned from my fears, he wondered, the question echoing louder than the whispers. Was it worth losing himself for their sake? As the grotesque image flickered, he caught a glimpse of the mourners, their pale faces etched with fear, eyes pleading for salvation. He wrestled with the weight of their expectations, the choice looming over him like a dark omen. Save them at the expense of his own identity. The shadows swelled and writhed, eager for his hesitation. Kael pressed a hand against the cold stone, grounding himself. He had journeyed too far. All those lost moments, the laughter, the love, were woven into his being.
To sacrifice them felt like tearing at his soul, yet as he gazed into the abyss of forgotten dreams, he knew he stood at a threshold, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. Could he transform this despair into hope? Mustering every ounce of courage, he took another step forward, the air thickening with expectation. The mourners' cries echoed in his ears, a siren's call urging him.
As dusk settled over Mourner's Canyon Temple, shadows stretched across the stone floor, casting an ethereal gloom. The mourners lingered, their voices a muted chorus of grief that wrapped around Kael like a shroud. Each whisper urged him to grasp the flickering ember of salvation. He stood at the edge, the damp stone mingling with the salt of unshed tears in the air. Memories surged through his mind, reminders of who he had been and what he stood to lose. The question loomed large and suffocating. How could he sacrifice the essence of himself to save others? The wailing of the mourners pierced through Kael's fogged thoughts. Clenching his fists, nails dug into his palms. Each cry echoed in his chest, reminding him of the faces he had loved and the bonds he had forged. Would they still recognize him if he let go? He turned slightly, glancing at the flickering candles, their flames twisting in the gentle breeze, each like a memory waiting to be extinguished. A chill gripped his spine as their hopes pressed against him, urging him toward the precipice. They believed sacrifice would lead to salvation, but at what cost? Memories surged, his mother's laughter, his father's steady hand, the warmth of friendship that once surrounded him. Each recollection shimmered like a thread weaving the fabric of his being. Kael staggered back, the temple walls closed in, their stone faces mocking. Panic clawed at his throat. A sacrifice was not just a loss, it was a rebirth, a foray into the unknown. The thought of sacrifice transformed into a new identity surged within him, a chance to become something greater. Determination flickered in his eyes like the candle flames. He stood on the precipice of choice, the abyss yawning below him. Memories swirled like autumn leaves caught in a tempest. He exhaled slowly, warmth spreading through the cool evening air. The mourners' cries faded, replaced by a resolute silence thrumming in his veins. Sacrifice would forge a new identity, yet the fear of annihilation gripped him, an iron vice around his heart. The decision pressed down on him, making the temple feel like it was closing in. Each heartbeat echoed the unspoken truth. To become, he must first let go. Blinking against the dimming light, he stepped back from the edge. The mourner's expectations still pressed heavy on his shoulders, but a burgeoning resolve tempered the burden. Their anguish intertwined with his uncertainty, creating a tapestry of yearning and hope. Sacrifice was not the end. It was a beginning, the first step toward a destiny woven from the threads of his past. As he turned to face the mourners, a single question lingered in the air, unspoken yet palpable. Who would he become if he chose to let go? The Mourner's Canyon Temple lay wrapped in the deep indigo of night, shadows clinging to the rough-hewn stone like memories refusing to fade. The air thickened with the acrid scent of burnt offerings, merging with an earthy musk from the canyon floor. Whispered prayers fluttered through the darkness, echoing against the towering cliffs that stood sentinel around the temple. Kael paused, his fingers grazing the stone's rough surface, contrasting sharply with the cold, smooth tokens left by mourners. Distant water trickled over rocks, playing a sorrowful melody, a reminder of life amid despair. This sacred ground buzzed with an undercurrent of anxiety, as if the very stone sensed the darkness creeping closer with each breath. Kael edged closer to the temple's entrance, the winding pathway cluttered with alcoves, whispering tales of grief and sacrifice. Flickering shadows danced along the stone walls, weaving through intricate carvings of the infamous jewel. The metallic tang of fear coated his tongue, sharp against the incense that clung to the air. A chilling breeze swept through, rustling the offerings as if they were alive. The anguished cries of the mourners filled the air, causing Kael to wince and clutch his head, urging him to flee or fight. The darkness swirled around him, thick and malevolent, as he struggled to comprehend the new god's demands. Mourners, once vibrant with grief, morphed into shadows, their forms twisting beneath the star-speckled sky. The stench of burnt offerings thickened in the air, causing him to recoil as dread settled in his stomach. He stumbled back, breath quickening as a shadow lunged at him, its presence suffocating and cold, forcing him to confront the terror clawing at his chest. The rough stone pathway pressed against his back,
grounding him in this surreal moment, the reality of his choices crashing down like a wave. As he tried to weave together a semblance of a plan, a blinding light burst forth from the temple's heart, painting the canyon walls with an otherworldly glow. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the mourner's anguished cries turned to gasps of awe and fear. Kael shielded his eyes, struggling to comprehend the revelation rippling through the air, a tangible force pulsing with possibility. In that moment he teetered on the brink of understanding and terror, the gravity of his impending choices pressing down on him. The air thickened with tension, and Kael stood at the precipice of his fate, the blinding light casting long shadows that flickered at the edges of his vision. The ground beneath him trembled, acknowledging his turmoil. The scent of incense mingled with the freshness of the night air, a bittersweet reminder of sacrifices past. In the heart of that darkness.
Chapter 6. Whispers of Dawn. Dawn broke over Mourner's Canyon temple, casting eerie shadows across the intricately carved stone walls. The air, thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings, carried whispers of the past with each gust of wind, creating an atmosphere steeped in solemnity and reverence. Cinder stood at the temple's entrance, his heart pounded against his ribcage, each beat a reminder of the urgency clawing at his insides. If he didn't uncover the hidden path within the maze before the week ended, he would lose the last vestiges of his identity, consumed by the darkness he desperately sought to escape. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself for the trials ahead, aware that redemption lay just beyond the threshold, accompanied by his deepest fears. As he stepped forward, the air thickened, charged with a palpable energy. A figure materialized before him, the guardian spirit of the temple, its form flickering like a candle caught in a draught. "To find the path to redemption, you must first face yourself," it intoned, its voice resonating within the hollow of Kael's chest. The spirit's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, piercing through his facade. "What do you truly seek?" Kael's breath stalled in his throat. He hesitated, grappling with the weight of his past, the decisions that had led him to this moment. The clock's relentless ticking filled his ears as dawn would soon turn to daylight, taking with it his chances of salvation. "I ache to sever these fetters of despair that bind me so tightly," he finally replied, his voice barely a whisper. The guardian's laughter reverberated through the temple, sending chills racing down Kael's spine. "Freedom," it mocked. "You will be a prisoner of your past." Suddenly, the temple floor trembled, and before Kael could react, a gaping chasm opened at his feet, revealing swirling shadows that beckoned him into their depths. "Face your first trial, then," the spirit commanded, and Kael was drawn into the darkness. Memories flooded him, images of betrayal and choices made in desperation. Each memory was a dagger, twisting in his gut as the truth of his intentions lay bare. "You must confront your past, Kael, or remain lost forever." With every heartbeat, the urgency tightened its grip. "Only 3 days remain until the abyss claims me," he reminded himself, the words echoing in his mind like a morose chant. The shadows whispered his failures, each one a reminder of his unworthiness. "You will never escape," they taunted, and doubt seeped into his resolve, gulping back the bile rising in his throat. Kael fought against the suffocating darkness. "No, I refuse to be shackled by the specters of my past." He clenched his fists. Dawn broke over Mourner's Canyon temple, a soft halo of light spilling into the vast rocky expanse. The stone facade of the temple stirred to life, intricate carvings of dueling figures casting long shadows across the cobbled pathway. The air, thick with the bittersweet scent of incense and burnt offerings, clung to Kael's skin like a shroud. Each breath tasted of earth and ash, a reminder of sacrifices made long before his time. The rustle of offerings left by pilgrims whispered their stories, mingling with the distant trickle of water echoing through the canyon, creating a solemn symphony of prayer and memory. Kael pressed his palms against the cool stone, his breath quickening as the weight of his past felt as heavy and unyielding as the stone itself. Kael paused at the entrance, the rough stone biting into his fingertips. The path wound upward, lined with tokens, small trinkets left behind, relics of lost hopes. Each step echoed, reverberating against the canyon walls, a reminder of the voices that had once filled this sacred space. Above, the sky shifted from dark indigo to soft rose, the soft rose light revealing the intricate carvings of the temple's facade. Shadows danced in the crevices, mirroring his own doubts.
Would he find redemption here among these stones? A figure emerged from the shadows, the folds of their robe blending seamlessly with the canyon's contours. "Kael, Cinder," they said, voice smooth as the trickling water. "The past is a maze, but there is a path hidden within it. You need only to remember." The words lingered like the incense in the air, thick with possibility. He stepped closer, the air between them charged with anticipation. The figure gestured toward the open-air courtyard, where the light pooled like liquid gold, inviting yet daunting. "Together we can navigate your memories. They hold the key to your freedom." As they moved into the courtyard, the sound of rustling leaves enveloped them, a gentle reminder of life surrounding this solemn temple. The scent of damp earth and sweet incense mingled, filling his lungs with the bittersweet taste of nostalgia. Each breath was a reminder, the warmth of hope intermingled with the chill of regret. "What if the shadows of my past are too great to confront?" Kael asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "You don't have to face it alone," the figure replied, their tone steady and reassuring. "The memories may be dark, but they are also the bridge to your redemption." Kael closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the canyon wash over him. The whispering prayers, the trickle of water, the rustle of offerings. The dawn light illuminated the path ahead, shadows stretching out invitingly. With each heartbeat, he felt the flicker of hope grow.
Dawn broke upon the Mourner's Canyon temple, light weaving through the jagged stone like a whispered promise. The air, thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings, clung to Kael's skin as he sat cross-legged on the rough-hewn stone floor. Shadows danced in the corners, reflecting the turmoil within him. The distant trickle of water called to him, a soothing lullaby against the backdrop of his chaotic thoughts. The faintest trace of charred wood lingered in the air, a bitter reminder of the child he had once spared. This temple felt alive, an ancient witness to his choices, urging him to reflect on the path ahead, though the weight of his past hung heavy like a storm cloud. Kael's fingers fidgeted with the heart-shaped stone nestled in his palm, its smooth surface familiar yet foreign, stirring memories that tugged at his heart. He fixed his eyes on the crumbling frescoes adorning the temple walls. Each image whispered stories of loss and longing, but his mind drifted to the child, the innocence he had shielded from the darkness. The child's laughter echoed in his mind, bright and clear, while regret settled heavily on his chest. Would he ever escape the shadow of his choices? The rustle of leaves outside the temple broke his reverie, and he shifted his eyes to the opening where the world beyond beckoned. A part of him longed to flee, to embrace the darkness that had once been his home, yet the flicker of hope from earlier anchored him. "Ah, the labyrinth, the cage of my own design," he murmured, his voice a dark melody laden with sardonic humor. "Perhaps it's time to either break free or become one with the shadows." His own words hung in the air like a ghost, taunting him with their implications. A sudden gust stirred the incense smoke, swirling it around him as if to cleanse the remnants of his past. He inhaled deeply, the acrid scent igniting memories of punishment and pain, of being the enforcer of a cruel lord. The past clawed at him, insistent and unyielding. Yet amid the chaos, a whisper of compassion flickered, a reminder of the child he had once saved. "Redemption, Kael," he whispered, his mind adrift. "Is redemption a choice, or is it something we inherit from our past?" He shifted again, the stone warm against his skin, grounding him. The need to reclaim his identity gnawed at him, a relentless tide threatening to pull him under. Kael closed his eyes, feeling the stone press into his palm. What if this labyrinth is merely a tomb for my hopes? The question lingered, heavy with the weight of his self-loathing. A frantic drumbeat echoed in the solemn stillness of the temple, his heart racing between the light and the darkness, one path promising freedom, the other a descent into the depths. The sun climbed higher, casting a Dusk draped the Mourner's Canyon temple in shadows, the dying light flickering against the intricately carved stone facade where echoes of ancient duels whispered through the air. The scent of incense curled around Kael like a fog, thick with the weight of burnt offerings, a heady mixture of sweet and acrid. Each breath tasted of the cool canyon air, sharp and refreshing, yet laced with regret. The rough stone pathway grounded Kael as the rustling of offerings left by visitors danced in the gentle breeze, their whispers urging him to remember. Stepping into the temple's embrace, a shiver raced down his spine as the open courtyard revealed itself, inviting yet foreboding, a doorway into the past. Kael's eyes darted to the alcoves lining the path, filled with tokens of grief and hope,
broken clay figures, faded flowers, remnants of those who sought solace here. The cool stone felt alive beneath his touch, rough and unyielding, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within. The distant trickle of water echoed softly, a reminder of life flowing just beyond his reach as he remained trapped in his past. The rustling leaves mingled with the echoes of those who had come before, beckoning him to join their quiet mourning. The former disciples stood a few paces away, shrouded in dim light, their presence steadying. "You're not alone in this, Kael," they said, their voice wrapping around him, soothing the sharp edges of his doubt. Kael's fingers brushed the smooth surface of a heart-shaped stone in his pocket, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill in the air, a reminder of the hope he struggled to embrace. He glanced up at the frescoes, their vivid colors muted under the dusk, questioning if he could ever rise from the ashes of his past. As the last light of day surrendered to night, the temple enveloped him in solemnity. Each heartbeat echoed like a ticking clock, urging him to decide. The air grew heavy with the scent of incense, as if the temple itself held its breath in expectation. The rough stone of the temple's wall pressed against his palm, steadying him, while the soft rustle of leaves whispered secrets of redemption. Yet doubt gnawed at him, a persistent hunger threatening to consume the flickering hope he fought to hold on to. "What if I'm forever trapped in this cycle?" Kael asked, his voice trembling, merging with the haunting echoes of the temple. The former disciples stepped closer, their warmth illuminating the shadows clinging to his heart. "You must try, Kael. Redemption isn't just a place to reach, it's a path with twists and turns, and each step matters." Their words hung in the air, a call to step beyond fear, yet the canyon's walls seemed to close in, a reminder of the confinement he felt within, as darkness settled over the mourners' camp.
The Mourner's Canyon temple loomed before Kael, its ancient stones shrouded in solemn dusk. Shadows curled like whispers around the grand structure, and the air thickened with the scent of incense, swirling memories of reverence and loss. Each breath weighed heavily, steeped in the prayers of those who had come before him. The indigo and gold hues of the fading sky mirrored his turmoil, a flicker of possibility ignited within him, a chance to connect with the fragments of his past. Resolute, he squared his shoulders, the echoes of a former disciple urging him onward. Redemption awaited, but doubt lingered just beyond his reach, threatening to pull him back into darkness. Kael moved deeper into the temple's embrace, the cool stone grounding him beneath his fingers. He inhaled the sweet, smoky scent of offerings left behind. Memories surged like a tide, crashing against the walls of his mind. Faces blurred and twisted, laughter mingling with tears. He stumbled forward, gripping the altar's edge tightly, as he fought to regain his balance. Could he confront this? A flicker of hope ignited within him, quickly snuffed by the roar, echoing from the maze beyond, a reminder of what awaited should he fail. As he wrestled with the cacophony of emotions, the whispers intensified. Each prayer beckoned him closer, fragments of his past weaving into the fabric of his heart. Vivid images burst forth, his mother's laughter, the warmth of her embrace, the way she had always known when he was troubled. Kael's chest tightened, a bittersweet ache blooming within. He stared at the flickering candles, illuminating the temple, their flames dancing like memories he struggled to grasp. Would he find the path forward, or let the past swallow him whole? Kael inhaled sharply, determination surging through him as he pressed against the altar, the cool stone a stark contrast to the fire blazing within. He clenched his fists, grounding himself in the present, yet the past clawed at him, fighting for release. A low rumble reverberated through the temple, reminding him that time was slipping away. He could not linger here, not while the maze waited, hungry for his hesitation. As he closed his eyes once more, the echoes of whispered prayers enveloped him, bolstering his strength against turmoil. Memories surged and receded like waves against the shore, each one a step closer to the truth he sought. In the depths of his mind, a hidden path emerged, illuminated by the flicker of hope he had nearly. Chapter 7 Shadows of Release. Dawn crept over the Mourner's Canyon temple, spilling pale light over the rough stone that loomed like a forgotten titan. The air was thick with the scent of burnt offerings and lingering incense. Echoes of prayers whispered in despair. It clawed at Kael's throat, a bittersweet taste awakening memories of innocence lost. Her laughter lingered, a haunting refrain echoing in his memory. He fidgeted with the heart-shaped stone in his pocket, its smooth surface cool against his palm, grounding him as he squared his shoulders. Today he would shed the remnants of his past and embrace the darkness as his purpose. Each footfall whispered against the stone a prelude to the storm brewing within him as he stepped forward, the weight of what was to come pressing heavily upon him. Kael paused, eyes flickering to the relic resting on the altar, an ornate locket, glimmering with echoes of the mortal realm. A reminder, yes, but also a burden. Shadows flitted at the periphery, figures emerging from the twilight, familiar faces twisted in anguish and regret. He gulped, his throat tight with the weight of their presence. "You think this is wise," a shadow called voice, echoing with sorrow that dripped like honey. Kael's breath hitched in his throat, the spectre's words a dagger to the heart. Wisdom is but a shadow, elusive and twisted, much like our fates, is it not? As he stepped closer, the shadows surged, swirling around him like a tempest. Their whispers, fragmented and haunting, gnawed at his resolve. "You were one of us, Kael. Remember the power you wielded, the fear you inspired." He squeezed the stone tighter, as if it could anchor him in this storm of memories. "Power is a cursed gift, one that chains the soul. I once held its reins, but it led to my undoing." He smirked, a bitter twist to his lips that masked the turmoil roiling within. The echoes shifted, their pleas wrapping around him like tendrils of smoke, each syllable a reminder of his failure. Kael clutched the locket to his chest, his breath quickening, the cool metal biting into his skin. A flicker of warmth ignited in the cold dawn. "You spared her," one shadow rasped, voice cracking like dry earth. "And for that you lost everything. Will you forsake your chance for redemption now?" Kael's gaze darted uncertainly between the shadows and the locket, torn between his past and the path ahead. "Redemption is a path paved with thorns, yet here I stand, ready to walk it once more." He felt the ground tremble beneath him, a reminder that the past was never far behind. The shadows loomed over him, suffocating, as if the dawn's chill had taken a tangible form. He could feel.
Dawn broke over Mourner's Canyon temple, casting long shadows that danced like specters around Kael Cinder. The locket's weight counted down the moments. He had to sacrifice the relic and step into the maze before the week ended. Failure meant losing not just his chance at redemption, but a piece of himself forever. The thick air stung with incense, a bitter reminder of his past. As he drew closer to the altar, echoes of his former self clawed at him, urging him to turn back. Just 3 days to find his way back. Just 3 days before darkness could claim him entirely. Kael's breath quickened as he approached the altar, the relic pulsing in his palm, a beacon of hope and despair. Each step betrayed him to the shadows that whispered behind. "Kael, you can't escape. Everything you love will just fade away." They hissed, voices overlapping and sharp. He paused, breath catching at the thought of abandonment. The specters of his past surged forward, their cold fingers grazing his skin, pulling him back into the abyss. Sweat trickled down his brow, the ticking clock echoed in his mind. Panic surged within him, urging immediate action. "You can't do this, you can't leave us behind." A voice wailed, sharp as a blade, piercing through his resolve. Kael's chest tightened, he stumbled, grappling with guilt. Memories of laughter, warmth, and love spiraled in his mind, a life he could lose forever. But the maze beckoned, promising freedom from the chains of regret. Gritting his teeth, he pushed through the throng of shadows, their cries growing desperate, clawing at his heart. Every step was a battle, a struggle to move forward while the past reached for him. The altar loomed closer, its surface gleaming like a siren's call. With every heartbeat, the reality of his choice pressed down on him, a burden he could hardly bear. At last, Kael reached the altar, trembling hands hovering over the surface. The relic glimmered, a final piece of his past that could either save him or condemn him. "If I want to be me again, I gotta let this go," he murmured. With one last shaky breath, he thrust the locket onto the altar. A bright flash seared his vision as the shadows howled in fury, their forms twisting in agony as the relic dissolved into light, leaving a hollow ache in his chest. As he crossed the threshold into the maze, the shadows had not vanished. They followed him, their whispers echoing with a haunting promise of what he had forsaken.
The maze stretched before him, dark and unyielding, mirroring his own fears. As he stepped deeper, the walls began to close in, the weight of his decision.
As dusk draped its velvet cloak over Mourner's Canyon, the sun sank beneath the jagged cliffs, casting shadows that whispered of the past across the sacred grounds. Kael Cinder stood before the altar, palm pressed against the cool stone, inhaling the fragrant incense that wove through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of canyon pears piled nearby, an offering from a recent festival. Lanterns flickered to life, illuminating intricate carvings depicting the vanquished people, their eyes forever watching over the living. Loss settled heavily on Kael's chest, echoing with the laughter of his family, now lost to the past. He inhaled deeply, readying himself for what lay ahead, though uncertainty gnawed at his resolve. Kael's gaze drifted to the temple attendants, their simple tunics blending with the canyon's colors as they prepared the evening's offerings. A young herbalist arranged dried beans and wild herbs with meticulous care, their movements deliberate and reverent. Memories of shared meals flooded Kael, laughter echoing through spaces filled with roasted lizard skewers and honeycomb drizzled over mushrooms, all now fading like wisps of smoke. The gatherings felt like distant echoes, where heads bowed and hands rested over hearts, murmuring in your honor as they offered food to the spirits of the fallen. Now he stood poised to leave that warmth behind for the unknown, the thought paralyzing him momentarily. The altar loomed before him, its presence a heavy reminder of his past and the expectations of the future. Kael hesitated, doubts wrapping around him like shadows. Superstitions whispered among the canyon folk about whistling at dusk, summoning the spirits, flashed through his mind, sending a shiver down his spine. The presence of Eltharion the Forgotten pressed upon him, the weight of the god's gaze, urging him to make his choice. With each breath, the relic pressed against his palm, a reminder of the life he was leaving behind. Closing his eyes, he let memories wash over him like the cool canyon air, and amid the fear, resolve stirred within him. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, a chill swept through the canyon, signaling the late hour. The temple, steeped in tradition, demanded respect for the coming-of-age rituals. He glanced at the offerings, food for the new god, and the spirit's memories of his family swirling in his mind. Honor and closure beckoned, but the fear of what lay ahead tightened its grip. With a surge of determination, he stepped forward, placing the relic upon the altar with trembling hands. The sound reverberated softly, a finality that felt both liberating and terrifying. Drawing a deep breath, he summoned the courage he had seen in others. The Mourner's Canyon temple loomed against the dusky sky, a majestic structure carved from the rock face. Intricate stonework depicted the legendary jewel that forever marked this sacred ground. As twilight settled around Kael, the air grew thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings, mingling with the hushed whispers of prayers that echoed through the canyon. Shadows flickered against the altar, forming spectral figures that danced just beyond his vision, stirring memories of loss and regret. Kael stood at the precipice of his past and future, the weight of sacrifice pressed down on him, a tangible reminder of his choices. The relic was gone, yet the sacrifice remained unfinished, an incomplete symphony vibrating through the stone walls. With the sun descending behind the jagged cliffs, he inhaled the crisp dusk air, a silent promise to confront the darkness that beckoned from the depths of the maze beyond the temple. Kael's gaze drifted from the altar to the shadows that coiled around him. They flickered and contorted, mocking him in a language only he could decipher. Regret manifested as the ghostly visage of his brother, eyes hollow yet piercing, a reminder of laughter turned to silence. He clenched his fists as tension coiled within him, each pulse of his heart echoing the names he had sacrificed, the faces of those he could no longer save. What once felt like a sanctuary now resembled a cage, the walls whispering accusations, questioning the very essence of his fight. Was this truly freedom he had sought, or merely a deeper entrapment? A gust of wind rattled the temple's offerings, the rustling leaves echoing the secrets of the past. Kael stepped forward, his feet moving on instinct. The shadows lunged closer, their whispers intensifying. "You think you've escaped, Kael? You're still the boy who failed." The words stung like a blade against his resolve, drawing a hitch in his breath as their taunts pressed down upon him. But he wouldn't falter. He had sacrificed too much to let these phantoms claim him again.
He closed his eyes, focusing on the rhythm of his heartbeat, a steady drum against the chaos. Opening his eyes, Kael locked eyes with his brother's shadow, resolve flooding through him. "I have shed that skin, and I won't be defined by my past," he declared, his voice strong yet trembling. The shadows recoiled, uncertainty rippling through their forms at his defiance. Each step he took toward the altar was a challenge, a declaration of his rebirth. The altar transcended its role as a mere monument. It became a catalyst, a mirror reflecting both his struggle and strength. Embracing the weight of his past, he moved toward the maze, his pulse racing with anticipation.
Twilight draped the mourners' canyon temple in shadows, the air thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings. Kael Cinder stood before the ancient stone altar, the smooth stone clutched tightly in one hand. Fingers traced its cool surface, seeking solace amidst the haunting symphony of regret and nostalgia that enveloped him. The rustle of leaves echoed like whispers of the past, while the trickling water beyond the stone walls served as a reminder of unshed tears. This sacred crucible held the weight of his choices, and the flickering torchlight danced against the rough stone, a witness to his turmoil. The atmosphere weighed heavy, saturated with echoes of prayers and the rustling of offerings in the wind, amplifying the solemnity of the moment. Kael inhaled deeply, the scent of damp earth mingling with incense, triggering a memory of a time long buried. A child, wide-eyed and innocent, clutching a flower in a crumbling alley, whispering secrets about the world. He had spared that child once. Could he do it again? Or would fear extinguish the spark of compassion that had led to his downfall? He paused, gripping the stone tighter, its edges biting into his palm. The relic in his other hand pressed down harder than expected, a tangible reminder of the life he once led, of the wrath he had wielded. The temple's whispers grew louder, urging him to act. "Ah, the past," he murmured, his voice rich and layered like the shadows themselves. "It dances between whispers and screams, doesn't it? A treacherous companion, always lurking." He chuckled softly, the sound bitter against the backdrop of reverent silence. Yet the humor fell flat, a mask shielding him from the truth. With every word he deflected the gravity of his decision, but doubt gnawed at him. Would this sacrifice truly lead him to redemption, or was he merely trading one prison for another? Stepping closer to the altar, the pulse of magic thrummed beneath the stone, resonating within him. The relic, a cherished connection to his former life, glimmered under the torchlight, beckoning him with promises of power and familiarity. Yet each shimmer felt like a betrayal, an echo of the chains that had bound him to a past riddled with darkness. He hesitated, caught in a web of nostalgia and fear, shadows clinging to his back as memories clawed for his attention. What if he lost everything? What if stepping into the maze led only to emptiness? But then purpose ignited a flicker of resolve. The maze had always been a place of freedom, of choices unmade. He could reclaim his identity, redefine himself beyond the shadows of his past. With a deep breath, Kael placed the relic upon the altar, the stone cool against his palm, a final farewell. As it touched the surface, energy surged through him, a connection severed yet transformed.